Over the course of 2022, I have had the honor and privilege to have nuanced discussions with people many times stronger, smarter, more experienced, and more handsome than myself.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
I've exposed myself to several different ideas and different perspectives on training, building muscle, being stronger, the difference between training for size and strength, and of course the overlap between them. Now, since this channel has started out as a power building channel, over the course of time and over the course of those discussions, I've kind of thought about leaving that behind in favor of more nuance, distinction, discretion, and being a bit more sagacious with my thoughts. But how about no?
You crazy Dutch bastard.
This is a power building channel through and through. Apes together strong, 2022, gamers rise up, virgins unite.
What did he say?
I am never leaving power building behind, simply because the mission of this channel is quite simple. Develop size and strength with useful and practical information. In some ways, I find it more valuable to be a pragmatist when we don't have clear-cut answers to everything in our life. And when those clear-cut answers do arrive, I do think it's 100% necessary to change or modify our understanding. But at the end of the day, the execution and effectiveness of anything is only as important as it is able to be applied to you. And how well you apply it to yourself, of course. So I'm going to be getting into some of the views I've had that have changed over the past couple months or years of my training career, and some ways that I'm going to be updating those ideas and then conveying them to you. But before I get to that, there is a quote I want to share with you. And this quote comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines, with consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He may as well concern himself with how his shadow is on the wall. Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again. Though it may contradict everything you said today, so you shall be sure to be misunderstood. But is it so bad, then, to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates, and Jesus, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever took to flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood." The two ingredients to long-term progress is challenge and change. Strict adherence to dogma or even past belief that no longer serve you or are no longer in keeping with new knowledge that is useful and maybe even found to be true is not a sign of dishonesty or being flippity floppity get off of my property, so long as the change is genuine and it isn't motivated by manipulation, but rather learning. Letting go of previously held beliefs is a sign of intellectual honesty rather than dishonesty. So while I was going through that time where I was really thinking about, is power building something worth talking about, saving, or advocating to other people by learning more from people who know more than myself, then I kind of came to a conclusion that yes, it is. It is worthwhile to continue talking about it regardless of what other people think. And the reason why that is the case, in my opinion, is what gets us into trouble is not what we do not know, it is what we know for sure that just isn't so. So let me get into some of those positions and thoughts and beliefs that I held that I no longer think to be the case, at least not for the same reasons. First and foremost is I used to think that power building is the best way to train for natural lifters.
You what?
This is #1 bullshit.
I do not think that this is the case anymore, but it is most definitely the best way for me to train. It is the style of training that I have the most experience with. It is the style of training that I do advocate on my channel and to those who decide to train with me, unless we state otherwise. Let's say their goals are more strength focused or more size focused, at which point I'm not just going to be a dick and be like, haha, no, power building, go vroom vroom. Like, if they have more specific goals, meaning they lean more so to one side, of course, I'm going to cater their training to that. But when it comes to the content of this channel, when it comes to the message of this channel, it will most definitely be more of a power building lean, a more size and strength lean. Power building for me is a style of training that maximizes my consistency and emphasizes my effort and progression. That is what really matters when it comes to how you train. Whether you train with mostly machines, mostly dumbbells, mostly calisthenics, rings, weighted calisthenics, doesn't really matter. So long as it maximizes your consistency, you are stacking session upon session and innovating that with recovery, and you are emphasizing your effort and progression over time, that's really all that matters at the end of the day. And that doesn't work any more or any less if you choose a more power building approach, a more bodybuilding focused approach, a more strength focused approach, because the end goal is dependent on you. Better or worse, in this context of different styles of training, depend on, well, what is the goal of your training? And for me, I want a mix of size and strength. I forgot where it was. I think it was posted maybe by Alec Onkiri or maybe even Pete Rubish. But there was a poll here on YouTube, and it was an interesting poll where it asked, what is your main goal? And the options were size or looking better, strength, a mix of size and strength, and then other. So 40% of people said size. So this really does line up with the common conception that most people who go into the gym do so to look better. I most definitely did. That was the main reason why I started working out. But then I kind of found strength training and found just how appealing and awesome it is to get stronger. But on the poll, only 15% of people actually said that they cared mostly about strength and getting stronger. The next biggest component that made up a large population almost equal to the same number of people who wanted to look better or get bigger was having that mix of size and strength. And in the packaging of YouTube Fitness, where you're kind of being pulled in either direction, where you have to be one and not the other, or only one and not the other, and that these things do not overlap or work well together, you can get somewhat lost. So, how have my views on the statement power building is the best way to train for natural lifters changed over time? Well, I think that if power building is to mean anything, right, and actually have some tangible substance to it, power building should look more like bodybuilding rather than powerlifting. Powerlifting is a clear and objective sport, and the best way to get better at a sport is to practice the skills necessary. However, there is no injunction that if you are a powerlifter, you can supplement your training with some hypertrophy work, but that doesn't necessarily make you a power builder because your main goal is still your total. When it comes to power building, I think it is more appropriate for it to fall under the umbrella of a bodybuilder who just really likes big basic compound lifts and relies on them for his size and progression. You can call this many different things, and many people have, because power building is often used as just marketing, and in the same way that other people can market it as old school bodybuilding or even old school powerlifting, because a lot of old school powerlifters and old school bodybuilders trained in the same gyms using very similar methods, and when it came to their actual competition time, did some of their methods change a little bit, where there was a bit more specificity on one end, and on the other there were some practices that don't really make it over to the powerlifting scene, such as obscene weight cuts, at least not to my knowledge. I'm sure that it does happen to an extent. I know for a fact it does, to weigh in slightly less than what you're walking around at, so you can be on the platform a bit heavier and then more full. But not necessarily to the exact same degree as to bodybuilding, where you're just trying to be as shredded as possible. So, when you look at the lineage of power building, I personally think it's more appropriate to associate it with bodybuilding rather than powerlifting, because the reason why powerlifters took that term and used it to market their training was because YouTube Fitness, internet fitness, was a cesspool of bad information for quite a long time because of the advent of steroid usage in bodybuilding. The steroids were becoming the main vehicle for people to get bigger, when really it should have been strength. Strength in multiple rep ranges, strength with multiple exercises, strength in a wide variety of different ways. That's what gets you bigger. So if you are going to be using the term power builder, you should first and foremost be a bodybuilder. The reason why for that is because when you ask yourself the two most important questions in someone who is trying to mix size and strength, the two challenges you're going to meet with is, well, how do I get bigger? How do I get my triceps bigger? How do I get my chest bigger? How do I get my back to be bigger? And you tell yourself, I'm going to get stronger at relevant exercises. I'm going to increase the number of pull-ups I can do. I'm going to increase the amount of weight I can put on my 5 or 8 or 10 rep max on my bench press, my weighted dip, my overhead press, and direct isolations for those muscles. So increasing the amount of chin-ups I can do and my curls, increasing the amount of weight I can do on my close grip and the amount of weight I can do on my tricep extensions. You get bigger by getting stronger. And then on the other side of that, well, how do I get stronger? My bench has stagnated a bit. You reverse that. You get bigger in relevant musculature. My bench is stagnated, so let me try to address issues in my upper back, my shoulders, my triceps, my core. You get my point. So what are the consequences of this belief? If we are going to go off of the assumption that power building should be more related to bodybuilding than it should be powerlifting, and you should be a bodybuilder first, meaning the priority is a complete and muscular physique, the exercises must be a tool to get there and not necessarily the priority. If the priority is the exercise and your performance on those exercises, you are a powerlifter, you are an athlete, and that's not necessarily the same thing as being a bodybuilder. Your increases in strength, reps, sets, load, all of those things are important, but they cannot be inflated by certain variables and factors that hurt your bodybuilding endeavors or bodybuilding goals. For example, dirty bulking, bloat maxing. I'm not saying that these things are inherently bad, because if they are relevant and if they are important to you and useful to your goals, then yeah, that's your personal choice and freedom to do so. But if you are going to decide to house a bodybuilder and a powerlifter in your own body, it makes more sense, because you want to have that bodybuilder aspect in your body, to not basically to shove it under the stairs like it's Harry Potter and then let the powerlifter roam around free. You need to have mutual respect between the two. So dirty bulking it could help your strength, but it's going to hurt the bodybuilder side of things. Now, that is not advice to not bulk. You most definitely need to bulk, but you do need to do it responsibly. And you still need to get stronger. Now, you can do this in a wide variety of different ways, whether that be form manipulations, excessive arching, really widening out your grip and decreasing the range of motion, which also hurt the bodybuilder that you're trying to develop in yourself. As a result, if you are going to be a power builder, be a bodybuilder first. Don't hurt your bodybuilding goals for the sake of your strength. That defeats the purpose of trying to mix the two. The reason being is because you are using strength to actually get bigger. And if your strength is moving forward without your size, it's not being conducive to your goal. If your goal is a mix of if your goal is a mix of both, you need to make sure that both are related in your training. Another thing that I kind of covered on this channel quite a couple times that is important to go over and be a bit more clear on was the difference between just get bigger and just get stronger. These are two arguments that have literally the exact same form but very different conclusions, because they are operating from different perspectives of which causes the other. If you take more of the just get bigger argument, the idea is that if you get bigger, you will be stronger. You got bigger, therefore you are stronger. And that is valid reasoning. For valid reasoning to work, all that needs to be assumed is that the premises are true. And if the premises are true, then the conclusion must necessarily be true. It doesn't really care about the content of the argument. I have videos elsewhere on the channel where I kind of go over this, because logic is more like a math class than it is actually just like, a subjective thing. there is more to it than that, right? And when it comes to the other side, the just get stronger argument, it's literally the exact same thing. If you get stronger, you will be bigger. You got stronger, therefore you're bigger. These are both valid inferences. These are both valid arguments. The question is one more sound than the other? For something to be valid, it depends entirely on the form of the argument, but for something to be sound, it depends on the factual nature of the argument. If you get bigger, you will be stronger. One of the key determining factors of performance and strength is muscle cross-sectional area, the size of the muscle. So it looks to be factually supported that if you get bigger, you will be stronger. And one example that I brought up was a lifter who downsized, lost a couple pounds or a couple kilos, multiple kilos really, but they still improved their overall total in powerlifting, meaning he got smaller and stronger. But as Alex Leonidas rightfully pointed out and challenged on my premises, was that the actual muscles themselves, the prime movers involved, got bigger, and then his lift got stronger. So it seems to me that it actually looks like both of these are valid and sound reasoning and they feed into one another. The nuances of what the difference between each of them, the practical differences between each of them, that's where the differences lie. But the underlying principles are the exact same. And you can see this when you look at the difference between perspectives. When you listen to someone who is more a pure bodybuilder versus you listen to someone who is coming from a more mixed position of size and strength, the practical recommendations are overwhelmingly similar, but the main difference is the definition of what is strength. The best way to train, the methods, tools, measurements, the metrics, most of it is overwhelmingly similar. And that is because good training requires a understanding and adherence to basic principles such as volume, intensity, effort, exercise selection, consistency, and then progression. And then you need self-experimentation, tracking, measuring, and observations to make more educated decisions as they pertain to you. This is necessary regardless of your goal, size, strength, or a mix of both. So it doesn't really matter what training method, philosophy you apply to yourself. The underlying principles and mechanisms that operate that allow you to make progress, get bigger, get stronger, are the same. And finally, I am a barbell fanboy. I am a barbell advocate, and I have been for quite a long time. And I have been known to have said that you need barbells to maximize your physique. And while I do think there is a more nuanced view available where, no, you don't need the barbell. You don't need the barbell to build muscle. You don't need the barbell to have an impressive physique. There are many people I know who are building incredible physiques without the use of barbells. They're using almost exclusively rings, calisthenics, dumbbells, machines, cables. There are many people who have shown that you do not need these lifts to maximize your physiques. However, let's first remember that the barbell lifts are great at building muscle. Yes, they might tax your body more than machines, cables, dumbbells, and what else have you, but that's not always a bad thing because the raw stimulus magnitude is higher. And that just means you need to be more responsible with your recovery and load management. Yes, these movements are incredibly taxing, but the aches and pains can be more attributed to poor load management rather than the implement itself. The next thing I want to mention is that barbell lifts are time tested and they are more objective. Machines have different strength curves, resistance profiles, and wear and tear can completely change the amount of tension actually being applied to the muscle. The manufacturer, and there's a lot of different variables that can go into them, but the barbell is more consistent. Yes, there are some poorly loaded, poorly calibrated plates, but for the most part, you know what you're lifting. And while you do not need the barbell to develop a great physique, it is a useful tool that eliminates weaknesses and insufficiencies, because that's what happened when you cut out an entire category of exercises. That same line of argument and reasoning can be applied to literally everything else: isolations and accessories, dumbbells, cables or machines, calisthenics, and especially the barbell. The main argument against barbells is that there are insufficiencies and weaknesses that arise from using them only, but that applies also to everything else. A mix and a compilation of multiple training implements and exercises is going to be better for your muscle building goals. And I would argue for strength as well. More is better when it comes to size. So if you just unnecessarily eliminate a whole category of exercises, you are shooting yourself in the foot the same exact way you would be shooting yourself in the foot if you relied only on barbells. Yes, you do need the barbells, but you need them in the exact same amount that you need all those other things: isolations, machines, dumbbells, cables, calisthenics, and other necessary or useful ways to build a physique that's really impressive. The more opportunities you give yourself to make progress, the more progress you will make. So, in conclusion, get bigger, get stronger, do your best, or at least do the best that you can, and always remember to start where you stand. My name is Cross the King, StanceTraining.com. If you're interested in my power building coaching, or you want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button, and there are links in the description below that really do help me out, and I do appreciate your support and your time to watch this video. Thank you. Have a great day.